So guys, I think I may have met my match. I have a bit of a problem. I have a over 50-year-old violin and I did all the right things and I'm really struggling to make it sound good. So, I mean, it sounds okay, but there's sort of a shallowness to the tone. It's like I can't get into the violin. Like I'm trying to play it and I'm trying to make it sound good, but so yeah, like I said, it's okay, but it's not great, and I'm missing that full-bodied sound. So I'll just show you so you can hear the difference. So even on the third finger, you can hear a long ring, like ring of the tone afterwards. It's got that distinctive school violin sound. So it has this kind of flat sound, like it doesn't have a depth and richness to it. So I'm going to take it to my workshop and I'm going to find out exactly why this is happening. Okay, so I have the sneaky suspicion that they left the top plate and back plate way too thick. So the way I normally measure a top plate is something like this. So I just take it and I have a gauge and I measure the thickness, and yes, this one is 2.5, but obviously I can't do that on this violin because I didn't take the top plate off. So I've got this tool called the magnetic thickness caliper. So the way this magnetic thicknessing caliper works, it has a little magnet here, and you put the magnet inside the instrument, and then there's a resistance and like a second kind of clicker, and when you pull back, you hear a click when that thickness is reached. So here, for example, let's see, the click is at 3 millimeters. It's not quite as accurate as the other caliper, but you know, it's 0.1 of a millimeter or so is very close. Now let's have a look. So what I'm looking for, the normal thickness that I'm expecting on a top plate is around probably 2.5 to 3.5 millimeters. Let's have a look. Okay, the top plate here is 4.5 millimeters, 5 millimeters, 3.5, 5 millimeters, 5 millimeters, 5.5 millimeters. Okay, so it looks like the top plate is between 4 and 5 millimeters thick. That is twice the thickness that we're looking at in an instrument. An instrument needs to have this beautiful flexibility from side to side. So remember, guys, the sound basically starts with a string. When you bow the string, that vibration from the string gets transferred onto the bridge. The bridge starts moving. It starts the top plate moving. So then the top plate starts vibrating, and then it moves through the sound post onto the back. So when the top plate is too thick, it just won't vibrate enough to create enough of an air column for a big sound. That explains why this violin isn't working the way it should, because the plates are just too thick and the top plate won't vibrate properly. Then the sound doesn't get passed through to the back. The back is too thick, so it can't vibrate properly. So it just creates a very small air column. So you just don't get that big loud sound that you really want from a violin. So what can you do when you have an instrument with plates that are just way too thick? You could try and put more tension on the top plate. So by raising the neck angle, you can put more tension onto the top plate. So say we change the angle this way, that would make for a higher bridge, and that would put more weight pressure. So normally the bridge pressure on the top plate is around 27 kilos, which is over 50 pounds. And that kind of gets the instrument moving. So you could do an ultra high bridge on these instruments and change the neck angle, but that's not a very good solution. Firstly, it puts a lot of strain on the bridge itself. It'll probably bend a little bit easier. So the other solution would be to actually re-thickness or re-graduate the instrument by opening up the instrument, taking some of these, little planes, and then planing out some of the timber out of the inside of the instrument. So that's probably the best possible solution. But to do that, most of the time you would also have to replace the bass bar. And that kind of repair, it would be somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 in Australian dollars, so maybe 2,000 US dollars, because it does take quite a lot of time to get it all right. Firstly, to open up the instrument, get it all right, then replace the bass bar. So this violin here is worth about $2,000 to $2,500 Australian dollars. So that would be the entire value of the instrument to re-thickness the plate. So it's not really a viable option. So for this instrument, I actually don't think there's a really good solution, because for about $2,000 to $3,000 you can buy a much better instrument like my Pierre Lamont or other instruments in that kind of price class. A lot of the cheap instruments, the cheap Chinese, the $100 instruments, will have that kind of thickness on the plates, because they often just cut so many corners in making the instruments that they leave the plates way too thick. And yes, you could probably take a $100 violin and regraduate it and make it sound better, but why would you want to spend $2,000 on a $100 violin? Just doesn't make economic sense. You're better off just buying an instrument that works properly in the first place. So anyway, if your instrument, if the plates are too thick, and when you're playing, it has sort of a slightly distant sound and you can't really get into the tone, it's probably because the plates are too thick. So it might be time to get a different instrument, or like I said, if it's a more expensive instrument, it might be worth getting the plates regraduated or re-thicknessed. But it is quite an elaborate process, and the violin maker that you work with really has to know what they're doing. And if you're interested what kind of thicknesses Stradivarius and Guarnerius used to use, I've got one of these wonderful Strad posters. I've got a few actually. This is the Guarnerius, the Fernandez Blanco Guarneri from 1732, and the thicknesses on the top plate, at the thinnest point it's 2 millimeters, at its very thickest point it's 2.7 millimeters, and the back at the thinnest point is 2.3 millimeters, and at the very thickest point, which is just a small point in the middle, it's 4.6 millimeters, way thinner than this violin here. So this violin here is actually made in Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. It's made in Lübí, which used to be called Schönbach. And Schönbach was the center of a lot of German violin making in the late 1800s, early 1900s. After the Second World War, all the German population basically got kicked out of Czechoslovakia, and they moved over to an area called Erlangen or Bubenreuth in Germany, in Bavaria, not far over the border. And they set up their violin making operations there. Violin making continued in Lübí, but with 90% of the good violin makers gone, there wasn't, it was a shell of its former self. So this instrument is is one that was made in those areas, in that area in 1966. You know, it looks quite okay. It's a bit shiny, so it was pretty much made as a student instrument. And like I said, the plates are quite thick, so it doesn't have that, you know, that really beautiful tone that you really want to get from a violin, and it's missing that richness that you look for. It'll probably work quite well as a folk fiddle or something like that. And this violin here actually also has a lot of sentimental value to the player. So there's still, you know, sometimes sentimental value is really important as well, because if someone you know well used to play that instrument, you know, that can be a very special thing to actually have that instrument that was so close to the player. So if the plates are too thick, there you can get them regraduated. That requires a top plate to be removed and the plates to be thickness, and then also you probably want the back to be regraduated as well. So that would make it an even more expensive repair than $2,000 to $3,000. So it's, for these kinds of instruments, it really isn't worth it. Then the other option really is to just get a different instrument. You know, for about $2,000 to $3,000, you can get beautiful violins like the Pierre Lamont or the Pierre Lamont Master, or if you spend a bit more, like the Hofmeister. So there's some really beautiful violins that you can get in the same price range as the cost of regraduating an instrument. Alright, so if you like that video, hit the like button, subscribe, and there's like a little bell with the subscribe button, just so you find out every time I post a new video. I try and post new videos every week to give you more insights into how stringed instruments work, into my workshop life and everything else. So in the meantime, keep making beautiful music, and I'll see you guys next time. Alright, bye!